At this point, I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Dennis Malloy.
Thank you for inviting me here tonight. It's my honor. It's really hot today. I just got a news alert. Governor Christie lost his temper again. Up on the seaside boardwalk, it seems the compressor at Rita's Italian Ice broke down. And we're freaking. Well, as Frank mentioned, the reason I got involved with the society is because of the Brian Aitken case. But before I get to talk about that, and I never really like to get too involved in causes and get too close to politicians or appeal to them personally, because most of them repulse me. But I'll tell you a quick story that I was, and it all ties together. It may seem a little off the path, but it ties together. Played golf with a friend of mine, invited me to play golf. I hadn't played golf in like 2 years. Any golfers here? Guns and golf, that's an interesting mix. I actually carry one of those in my bag for myself. So when we played golf, took us to a nice restaurant afterwards. I was having dinner, and nice Italian restaurant, and the waiter mentioned that he had just gotten married, showing his ring. The waiter was gay. So people asked him questions. So did you go out of state? Did you go to Massachusetts? Where did you get married? I said, no, I took a cruise, the two of us said something to each other, ship's captain raised a glass, toasted us both, and that was it. It was our ceremony, we made a vow to each other, and we exchanged rings, and that's it. So I said, well, you don't want to make it legal, we can get married? He said, are you kidding me? I'm 2 years away from retirement, I'm not giving away my pension. I'm not giving half of my pension away. I thought to myself, if that was a girl that he was with, everybody would have said, what a jerk. But since it was another guy, then, well, yeah, sure, he should protect himself. And the people, you know, who are pushing for, and I'm for gay rights. Everyone should have equal rights. If you want to do whatever you want to do in the privacy of your own home, your own relationship, have fun. Your business is not my business. You're not hurting anyone. Two consenting adults, do whatever you want. If you want the same burden that married people have when that thing is over with, good luck to you, brother. Because I've been there and it ain't no fun. So rather than people fighting for the government being out of our business when it comes to our personal life, because if you're trying to get out of a marriage, it's the law and the state makes it difficult. And to have someone in a black robe tell you when you can see your own children, and how many times a week or month you can see your own children, and how much of your income some other person is telling you you must provide for your own children. Why isn't the general population more concerned with getting the government out of all of our personal lives, rather than screaming and yelling and fighting to have the government more involved in another subset group of individuals? Makes absolutely no sense to me. And most gay people I talk to say, yeah, I wouldn't take that deal. I do a domestic partnership, you can dissolve it in 60 or 90 days with whatever you came in with, and you're done. And if you make good decisions with people you spend your time with or commit your life to, you shouldn't have anything to worry about. People make mistakes and you may end up with a jerk, but that's not my problem and it's not the state's problem. But this we saw fit throughout the years to have the state become more and more involved in our personal life. So I find it funny that, you know, that becomes an issue, a campaign issue in a big race. Well, what do you think about gay marriage? Well, I think it would be just as dumb as the marriage laws we have now. But we look at it, and by the way, I'm not someone, I'm divorced 14 years. I'm not someone who got burned in a divorce. She and I sat down and said, listen, this is what, you know, we can do, you can do, I can do. I'm going to see the kids every day, you're going to see the kids every day, and that's it. And we worked it out. Now, some disagreements aren't that, you know, smooth and that easy, but we worked it out. That's our personal business. And the reason I bring up the story of that is that we have become more and more accustomed to the government being involved in our personal lives. And for security, well, what if the man were to leave and not take care of the children? That would be bad. Hopefully family, friends, the people involved in the situation become stronger and recover from that. But we want the security of the government involved in our lives, involved in our business. And Ben Franklin, I'm sure I'm going to butcher it, but you all are familiar with Ben Franklin's quote of someone who would give up a little bit of security for a little bit of safety deserves neither safety nor security. And the key word is deserves. And people don't realize if you beg the government for this protection, this security, this safety, you do not deserve the liberty you've given up. And you do not deserve the security that you're looking for if you expect the government to give it to you. So it was 2010, early November, I got an email from a guy named Larry Aitken, who's about my age, lived about the next town over really from where I live. And I read the story. Someone had passed it along to me and said, listen, this guy's desperate and he wants you to read his email about his son being in jail. People send emails with problems, and if I can shed light on it and try to help, I certainly want to. I read this and I was absolutely dumbfounded that this would happen. I wrote it back and I said, listen, I want to look you in the eye and sit down with you and have a conversation. I talked to him on the phone. I said, what you're saying, if it's true, it's unbelievable. It can't happen in our country, and even in this state, which is probably the worst for freedoms and liberties and rights, especially when it comes to guns. So we sat at a diner, and I was just blown away. I said, listen, I'll commit to helping you and putting this out on the air, but you got to tell me for sure there's nothing I'm missing here. There's nothing you're not telling me in this story. There's no hidden agenda. There were a couple of people at the radio station said, it doesn't sound right, it doesn't smell right, I don't know. So I sat with him for about an hour and we talked, and I said, I'm going to help you. And we went on the air and pleaded with people to call the governor's office, to read over this. He had a website where people, had friends and family, had put together a Facebook page and gave all the details. And the details, if you're not familiar, are pretty simple. He had moved from Colorado to New Jersey because he and his wife at the time had split up. And he transported the guns back legally to the state. He was at his parents' house and in a process of moving in with a friend. Well, in that process, it wasn't a straight shot from house A to house B. And one night he was despondent and was on the phone with his mother, and his mother made a fatal mistake in that he said that, I can't not go without seeing my children, and she's going to drag me through this mess, and I can't go through this. I'm afraid of what I might do with myself. So she went ahead and called the police. The police showed up, called him on his cell phone, and said, we're here, your parents are concerned. Which a lot of us would do. If we heard our son say that on the phone, maybe we would do the same thing. I think the husband was more of the mind like, he'll come home or let me talk him down from the ledge, but the mother pushed the panic button and called the police. So they called him on his cell phone and got him to come home. Got him to come home, they asked him if he had any weapons, and he said, yeah, I'm in the process of moving. He also had his blender in there, and he had his toothbrush in there, and his dishes and everything else. He was legitimately packed to move. And in the trunk, he said, yeah, I have firearms. And he had bought 2 handguns. He was not a gun enthusiast, but there was a grisly murder near the town where he was living with his young wife and young baby in Colorado, so he saw fit to buy handguns and ammunition. So he showed the police officer, and the officer said, listen, being the nature of this call and the state of mind you might be in, we're going to take these weapons and put them in your father's house for safekeeping and send you on your way. So they came inside and asked Larry if he had room in the house, and he said, well, I really don't have room for the weapons. And the police officer said, well, we'll store them down at the police station until you can figure out what to do with them. And an hour went by, and the police cars were still out in front of his house with some additional cars there. He came out to find out what was going on. Brian was in handcuffs. The cop who had talked to him earlier said, listen, technicality, we'll iron this all out in the morning, we'll spend them overnight, in the town, in the jail, and come and get him tomorrow. Well, the next day he'd been transferred to county, and off he went. And that was a year or 2 prior to me getting involved. So, by the time I got involved, he was almost 2 years in prison, serving a 70-year sentence. The prosecutor, the judge, the police officials involved that night in the arrest all made major mistakes, and all maybe were too hungry for advancement or God knows what, a name for themselves. But the thing that really ticked off the prosecutor was that the Aikens had gone to Judge Napolitano of Fox News when the case first came up. Judge didn't like that, prosecutor didn't like that, and off to the races they went, to putting this guy in jail for 7 years. Like I said, when I heard the story, I have sons that age, and I think of, you know, the kind of country they're growing up in, and I hopefully still have a little bit of life left in me that I'm going to be around a while, and don't want to live in a country where if you follow the law, you can still get put in prison for 7 years, having a clean record, not doing anything, not making any attempt to commit any crime with your weapons, and still be put away for 7 years. Not the kind of country I think any of us want to live in. So, with some pressure from various forces, from the Second Amendment Society, from the governor's office, from some media attention, was just before Christmas of 2010 that Brian was let out of jail. And I get emails from him twice a year thanking me for, you know, whatever I was able to do to call attention to it, and from his dad as well. Good people, average people, regular working people, and like I said, that moment, that whole scenario just shook me up so much that you couldn't help but get involved and couldn't help feel that something is desperately wrong with our system and with the direction we're going. Like I said, I'm not someone who got burned in a divorce case, so it's not why I talk about how horrible some of the divorce laws and family and court laws are. And I'm not someone who owns a weapon. But I grew up hunting with my dad, my uncles, and as an adult I've hunted a few times with friends, and I know responsible gun owners. And I tell you, the irresponsible gun owners, the people who buy them illegal and use them to commit crimes, aren't having meetings at the American Legion. And there's absolutely no reason why legal, well-intentioned citizens should be able to secure firearms in the way that it's been set out, and this state is more strict than most. And it's important that you all are here tonight to hear what's going on with these laws, and also to hear how overreaching our government has gotten. And this hasn't happened in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 2 administrations. This has incrementally crept up on us since the end of World War II. And we got comfortable, and we got secure and fat and happy, and we've drifted off the path, way off the path. You know, when you're on the highway and you drift a little bit because you're not paying attention, looking down at your phone, you hit that rumble strip. Well, we on the second tire of that rumble strip. And the noise should be deafening to most freedom-loving citizens of this country. And it's not one politician or one party, but it's the mindset of a lot of people who have become comfortable with giving away our liberties and our rights just for that sake of security. And it's wrong, and it takes courage to stand up and say, no, I don't want those laws. I see where they're against the Constitution. The Constitution also wasn't made up in a month or a week or even over the course of a year. Well-intentioned, well-thought-out, well-educated, well-traveled, well-studied men of honor put that together for a reason. They saw the mistakes over the history of mankind with governments, and they picked and formed what's not a perfect system, but damn near perfect for the rest of the world to see and to want to come to. And I think we are really letting that go. And to get involved in a society like this, come to meetings like this, hear people speak, get involved, know the politicians who are moving in the direction of taking more and more of your rights away, is important. And it's important to go even to local elections and hear local politicians, get involved, go to town council meetings. Speak, let your voice be heard. Someone may feel the same as you, but because, you know, they don't hear anybody else get up there and say it, they figure, well, I just might be alone in my thoughts and just my family or my friends feel this way. We all have to stand up and let our voices be heard, that we've got to turn this thing around and speak up when we see something going wrong. So I want to thank you for inviting me tonight. And if there are any questions before I turn it back over to people who really know what they're talking about. Okay.
Are you still in New Jersey?
Am I still in New Jersey?
I can see that you are. Is Brian Aitken still in Jersey?
Brian moved out of New Jersey. He was...
Good man.
About 3 months ago, I got pictures of him proposing to his girlfriend, and they're out west somewhere, and there was a whole series. He made a special proposal, or a helicopter came down, picked him up, took him to a park, he got on his knee, I got the whole roll of 135 pictures of him. So yeah, the first thing he wanted to do when he got released was get out of Dodge. Yes?
Yeah, even though it was pardoned, this seems like it would be the quintessential case of a civil rights violation, just like it would be if the state decided to not allow blacks to vote. Has that gone up the chain to basically overturn New Jersey's laws as a violation of the Second Amendment from the federal level all the way to the Supreme Court?
The climate is such that, like you said, you mentioned if it was a certain group and the rights were violated, people have more of a sensitivity to certain minority groups having their rights violated. Gun owners aren't seen as a troubled group or a group that's been put upon. They are now, but people don't view it that way. And the media language and the media presentation of these ideas and these cases means a whole lot. And it's not going to benefit a politician. It certainly wouldn't benefit any politician to come to the aid of a member of a minority group, whether it be religious or racial or ethnic, to say, hey, I'm standing up for this guy or this woman's rights, or a female who's been wronged in a certain way. But for that person to go out of the way and say, in a state like New Jersey, that I'm defending the rights of a gun owner and they violated civil rights, you might get some traction with people like us, but it wouldn't get the immediate attention and the traction in the legislature that it would with some of those other groups. And that's unfortunate. That's the best answer I can give.
But I'm saying going beyond Jersey, take it to
the federal level. Again, you've got an attorney general and an administration. I think it isn't a real strong pro-Second Amendment group and lobby, so I don't think their office is going to be too sympathetic to it. I would think in a different environment, different administration, it should, and perhaps in the future it would. I don't know what the statute of limitations on that is. I think Brian just wants to get on with his life at this point.
So he chose not to pursue it at a federal level, beyond the states?
At this point, no. And I think he was so happy. You know, he saw that he kicked up a little dust when he first got brought into court and the trouble that I caused him, that I think he's enjoying the free air a little bit too much at this point to kick up any more dust. And like I said, in the future, if the climate seems a little more friendly for that kind of a complaint to be heard, he might. Yes, sir?
What are your thoughts on the UN arms treaty that's coming up at the end of the month?
I plead ignorance. I have to plead ignorance. Is there something you'd like to share with the group that...
Well, he mentioned it earlier about on the 27th, Hillary Clinton is supposed to sign an arms treaty on that, kind of gives like the UN and the world like kind of like a small arms treaty that will, kind of a backdoor into the Second Amendment. I had
heard Dick Morris talk about that the other day, and someone sent me a notice on that. I don't know if it was you, Frank, or someone else sent me a text saying you got to check out his website and see. So I hadn't read it, I hadn't looked into it, but again, that's a frightening thought. And again, people know the meaning of the word sovereign nation, and that's the definition right there. But that movement's been promoted for the last 10 or 15 or 20 years. We've heard people talk about that. New World Order and that sort of thing. Yes?
This bill is going to be signed on the 27th by Hillary Clinton, I believe. It's against the Constitution of our Congress. Our Congress has to reject it. I hope our Congress does, or we're in big trouble.
Well, the Congress has become almost impotent in the most recent years with executive orders and things like this being signed in this proposed treaty on the 27th. So if the treaty is signed, does Congress have to sign off on it to make it law? They have to ratify it. Is there an effort in this state or in other states to pressure their congressmen to?
Not by the Senate.
Yeah.
The Senate has
There's something, again, that flies under the radar because the media, in general, is not shining too much light on it. You'll get people like Dick Morris and Judge Napolitano, or people on Fox News, which is the only network that I know of would really shine light on it. And I imagine I'm in a room where I can say, I watch Fox News without getting the
You're okay.
Just don't say MSNBC.
Well, I tell you a quick story. I have a cousin from southern Italy. He's a very bright guy. He's 28 years old, speaks 5 languages, well-educated in Europe, got a job with the EU in Geneva, and then applied for a job with the World Bank. The World Bank is sort of under the auspices of the United Nations, but really its biggest contributor to its fund, to its monies, is the United States. So he had moved to Washington, D.C. to work for World Bank. And he's from a social democratic country, and he wants to help the world, to save the world, and he is a bureaucrat, so he's got that mindset. We talk about politics a little, and he's polite enough not to talk about American politics because he said, really, I don't know much about it. And I would be speaking out of turn because I'm not a citizen. I live here now and I work here, but I don't really know. And I try to explain my point of view, a libertarian point of view, and why the American Constitution works and why it established the best nation in the history of the world. And I think he would agree with that. But the little nuances he's not so familiar with, so he's polite enough not to comment. But he'd heard about the Tea Party, and I said, what do you know about the Tea Party? He said, well, I've heard that they're racist, and they're xenophobic. I said, do you have any evidence of that, or that's just what I heard? And I said, well, do you know what the Tea Party is? And I explained the Boston Tea Party, and I explained that it happened at a time when we had the first African-American president, but it wasn't because we had the first black president, but the way the information came to him was all these, crotchety old white people got up and got mad because we elected a black president. I said, it couldn't be further from the truth. I said, you've got to be kidding me. I said, I don't go to meetings and I don't participate, but I believe in exactly what they believe in. Limited government, less intrusion into you, more liberty, more freedom. And he started to understand. And I knew that he understood a little bit better about American politics and media when about 3 weeks ago we were talking. He said, I watched MSNBC and it was blatant how one-sided their coverage was. I was like, thank God. That, his socialist, upbringing didn't totally cloud his vision. Like I said, he's a bright kid. But any other questions I can answer? Well, I want to thank Frank for inviting me. Thank you for having me.
I do have one question I want you to say.
Sure.
What was the actual charge, Brian, the technicality?
Well, Frank would have more information on exactly what it was, but the only detail of that I know is that a new law had been in place for about 24 hours. 24 hours. It was like January 2nd of 2009, I believe, or 8, when he was arrested. And that's why the cop initially said, here, put the guns in the house, we're just going to get him out of his possession, or we'll keep him at the station. And then when the captain, I guess, or the shift commander had heard what was going on, he said, no, there's a new, and I guess he had gotten a directive from the county prosecutor, if you have any gun violations, let me know, and see if it's covered by this new statute, which had only been in place for about 24 hours. It started January 1 of that year. And Frank, do you have
Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, it's very similar to what I was talking about before with this bill that Linda Stunder was putting out. Okay, I don't know if you were here for that, but Assemblywoman Linda Stunder put out a piece of legislation, and this is exactly the same situation. She wants to raise the penalty from a third-degree felony, where there's discretion, to a second-degree felony for possession of a firearm on school grounds. Unlawful possession of a firearm, or criminal possession of a firearm on school grounds is already a second-degree felony. Okay, so there's no reason for this. What this bill would do is the same thing that happened to Brian Aitken. It used to be that the mere possession of transportation of your firearms without obvious criminal intent or criminal activity was a third-degree offense. Paula Dow had just, as Dennis mentioned, had just raised that from, because of legislation, had raised that from a third degree to a second degree felony. So again, the Graves Act. The Graves Act engaged, and then there's a mandatory prison sentence. So that's what happened to Brian Aitken. Now, this girl with Linda Stender is going to do exactly the same thing. I did send you information on that. And because here, you know, you pull over, you get a flat tire, and you pull over, and you happen to be on school property to change your tire. You just came back from hunting or the range or whatever. You have a firearm on school property. That's it. Doesn't matter that you're not doing anything.
And in this particular case, they didn't buy the story that he was in the process of moving or on the way up to his buddy's house. They thought he might have had other things in mind and couldn't prove it. Even getting the guns out of his hands and saying, all right, even though we see your toaster and your lamp in there and your toothbrush, we can get you on this technicality, and they went ahead and interrupted. Again, thank you all very much. Oh yeah, one more. I must like applause.
So you know more about it?
So, say that again?
The UN treaty thing you brought up? I'm sure you're familiar with George Soros.
Yes.
Look up the company or organization that he founded, IANSA. It's like Peter but bigger.
Right.
And he sends his people to the UN treaty every 2 years to attempt to disarm our country.
And
They have a pistol in front of the building with a barrel pistol that they like a president.
And Hillary Clinton is due to sign this on the 27th.
And senators have gotten together, of course, 2 years ago, because it takes two-thirds of the Senate to ratify. And even on the Democratic side, conservatives, like out in Arkansas, said they won't do it.
And hopefully it'll stop there. And hopefully, I can bring it up on the air and get some local attention to it. Hopefully it gets some attention nationwide. And this is a state where gun rights are sort of, you know, a very background issue and only important to a handful of people. But in other states, I can imagine they'd be freaking out over this.
Look up George Soros and see the connection.
Yeah, I'm familiar with George Soros. Yes, sir.
Two of the countries that are on the committee forming this treaty are Iran and Azerbaijan, which are not known for freedom.
Two of our friends.
Yeah.
It's an unusual hunting hat you have, sir. I love the diversity in the group, and I love some of the T-shirts. Are you the one who couldn't ask me a question? You're the guy that has the "you got to kill it before you grill it" T-shirt? Thank you again for having me.